Hello, welcome to another lesson. This is Kenneth Acha. I'm going to be leading you today again, and we're going to be talking about the responsibilities of the board of directors. You probably already know by now that the board is the key leadership part of every organization. The board is akin to the Supreme Court and the Congress of a nonprofit organization. Remember that nonprofit organizations are not owned by the founders. This is key. They're not owned by the founder. Who owns them? Nonprofit organizations are owned by the public. They're owned by the public. And so the law of most countries, really every country that I know of, has provisions made. Okay, it has provisions made in a way that certain individuals within the community where the organization is are selected, and these individuals sit on the board and guide the resources of the organization that belongs to the public. So these people are basically given the trust so to guide the organization that belongs to the public. Now, that's why some board of directors are called board of trustees. Yeah, you got it. So, the nonprofit belongs to the state by not the government but the public, okay? Belongs to the public. That's why nonprofit records are public records. You're supposed to be able to publish your records and give them to anyone who wants to look at them. And that's because it's not a private business. For profit businesses are private and they are not subject to some of these regulations. So now, because the nonprofit is owned by the public and has put trustees or the board of directors to be in charge of it, the law has certain requirements and certain responsibilities that we're going to look at in this lesson, and they're important to know. We're first going to just talk about general responsibilities, and then we'll hone in and talk about two legal words that are usually used, two legal responsibilities or duties that the board has, which basically have been broken down into the general ones that we're going to look at. So let's get right into it. We're going to basically look at the first one, that the board of directors have as the responsibility to determine the direction of the organization. Okay? They do this by determining or defining the organization's purpose, mission, vision, and core values. And we've already spent a lot of time talking about that. They also create strategy and key policies for the organization. They make the choices that allow the organization to win. We have spent a bunch of time talking about creating strategy, so you would know that by now. The third one is that they oversee and evaluate the implementation of the strategy that they create. And the fourth one is that they authorize major transactions or any other transaction that they feel like they need to be able to authorize. For example, if you start a nonprofit and you have a board, the board is going to be able to say, okay, checks that are above $5,000, for example, they should be signed by the president and by maybe the vice president or the treasurer together. Maybe the executive director who actually runs the organization on a daily basis can sign checks that are up to $500, $1,000. They will have a limit so that the organization can run on a daily basis. But when a big decision on a purchase or a big check wants to be signed out for something big, then the power to sign that doesn't belong to the executive director who does the day-to-day things. They need to bring in the board of directors and the leaders in the board of directors who have that power to come in and supervise what they are doing so that they keep the organization supervised. So They manage the organization's resources, and the organization has several kinds of resources. They have human resources. So they basically supervise the human resources of the organization, and we'll see in another point that they hire and fire the executive director. So when you start an organization, you will be the founder or you have co-founders. Legally speaking, you don't become the executive director just because you founded the organization. And this is something that many people don't understand. They think that when you start the organization, it's yours. It's not yours. And we're going to talk about this somewhere else. I hope we have time to. That God honors the states. Unless a government is doing something that is outrightly unbiblical, we are supposed to follow to the T every law that the governments have. If you read Romans 13 and the Bible as a whole, Romans 13 is a very good chapter that will tell you that. But if you read the Bible as a whole, God wants us to be obedient citizens. So something I see us making many times as Christians is that we break some of these laws in trying to keep to run our organizations in ways that we have the powers that we need to be able to, we feel we need to be able to do our ministries. But doing that is illegal, as I'm going to, when we get to the end of this lesson, we'll see that it's important to realize that when you found an organization, you're doing a free service to the public. You don't expect to be rewarded for that free service. You're doing a free service to create something that benefits the public, whether it's a religious organization or not. Religious organizations are a little different. Your organization, if you're a Christian, will be a religious organization. And yes, even though religious organizations would be formed for religious purposes and so have the power under all state laws that I know to be able to select only Christians to their board and people who believe the same things and have the same faith. But you cannot do things to be able to ensure that the person who leads the organization is only you, unless that the board votes that you, the founder, lead the organization. So it's going to be it's something that includes a lot of vulnerability and allowing God to be able to move, and God loves that. But you and I, oh boy, I am a control freak in many circumstances. I want to keep control, okay? I want to keep control. And many of you, because you are passionate about what you want to do, you just can't see not taking steps to make sure that you keep control over something you're so passionate about. And that is a weakness akin to almost sinning on the path of doing good. It's like, I'm going to do this wrong to be able to allow me to do good. And God says no to that. Okay, so point number 5, manage the organization's resources. Basically, human resources, we're going to see that they keep a general eye and oversight over the volunteers and everything, but they don't do the day-to-day jobs. They recruit the big person who will be an executive director, and then the executive director then works on behalf of the board to do everything else. Okay, but there are other resources. There are financial resources. So, for example, what the board of directors is responsible for doing is to make sure that they are in charge of creating the budget and of supervising and making sure that they have good financial structures and systems to be able to ensure that the organization is run in a very financially sound way. That's something that the law requires boards of directors to do. That's a responsibility that they have. Okay, so those two key responsibilities: human resources and financial resources. And if the organization has any other resources like buildings or planes or cars or whatever the organization has, if the organization needs those things, the overall supervision and oversight and management belongs to the board of directors, And they often do that work through the executive director who reports to them. They hire and fire the executive director. So I just talked about that. They select the executive director. They also fire the executive director. They also support the executive director and review his or her performance. And then if they like it, they continue to serve. Let him serve. If they don't like it, they will remove him. Starting a non-profit organization that, as a Christian, when you're passionate about something, is a very, 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 very vulnerable thing you do. When you spend all that energy working and putting something together, the selfish part of you says, I have to put only board members that are gonna keep me running my organization. And the government says, no, that's not right. You have tax exemption and you are a non-profit because the law allows you to do that. And so because the public allows you to do that, you cannot run that as though it were your for-profit organization. If you want to be able to select people that support you, then you should start a for-profit organization. And some people don't know that you can start a for-profit organization, and it actually does the same thing as a non-profit organization. You may not be able to accept donations, but there are many ways to raise funds than donations. People can actually make a donation to a business if they choose to. They may not have tax exemption, but if you understand how much tax exemption really is worth, you see that it's sometimes worthless. So, but that's a subject for a different discussion. The idea here is that it involves a lot of vulnerability, that to do it right before God. And I think that some people often think that the end justifies the means. For God, if a person is serving God and wants to truly serve God well, the end does not justify the means. You are going to be obedient to the state and to the laws that allow you to do this to the T, and obeying them at the level of your heart. Going about starting a nonprofit, and this is hard stuff I'm saying. This is very hard stuff. It's hard stuff for me to do, but it's the truth. It is the truth. It is the truth. You could ensure that you select the best board members who are going to be strong, mature Christians that are mature, that are just like you and passionate. But then when you do, the law says, we're going to talk about it, you have to vote these things out, and you have to do it in a way that you're not favored. Okay, and that's tough. Okay, that's tough. So let's keep going. More. Number 8, mentor the senior management. When you recruit the executive director, you're going to mentor the executive director. Then number 9, ensure effective organizational planning. You're going to make sure that not only is the strategy developed by you and that strategy is supervised, planning is part of strategy, and ensure adequate resources. Here, for a nonprofit organization, the board is in charge of fundraising. They organize the fundraising, and that's why when we see later, you have to select board members that are willing to fundraise. Okay. Number 11, determine, monitor, and evaluate the organization's programs and services. They choose which programs an organization should have. They monitor and they evaluate it. So the staff don't. And there's a difference between the responsibilities of staff, which includes the executive director. The people that work, the volunteers, the paid people, the executive director that work every day in an organization, those are the staff. They're different from the board of directors. Even though for a small organization, there usually is no staff, and the board of directors is the staff, and they do everything from day to day, and that's okay. And the government understands that sometimes when you start a nonprofit and it's small, you don't have any resources to pay staff, and so you work. And it's okay, even when the organization grows and some key people that are working day to day still sit on the board. That is done all the time. But you'll be doing board in one capacity and staff in another capacity. Staff do the day-to-day running of the organization. Board members usually meet once a year. Not once a year. Once a month, okay? Not once a year, once a month. Usually meet once a month, and sometimes every quarter, 4 or 5 times a year, and they may have meetings that are called if something urgent comes up, but they don't work day to day normally. And if you are both a board manager and a staff, especially in a small organization, as I just said, then you'll be doing both. Okay. And 12, enhance the organization's public image. So there are also the PR people for the organization. They make sure that they represent the organization well. And that's key also when you're choosing board members, because board members are the people that represent your organization. If you have board members that are not men and women of integrity, then you are basically making your organization an organization that has no integrity, and that sucks. You don't want that. They serve as a court of appeals. I said earlier that the board is the biggest body in a non-profit, in the sense that they have all the power. They control the organization. A board could vote the non-profit founder off the organization. They could do anything. The law gives them that power. And God also does through the law of the nations, which are fair. The laws in this area are fair to be able to protect the public interest, and God is keen on that. So the laws about non-profit formation in most countries, especially like in the US and even in many developing countries also, they're very fair, and I think that God supports those laws. So if the non-profit founder is seen to be acting not in the best interest of the organization, because it's not the interest of the founder, but the interest of the organization, then the board could vote the founder off. And that sucks. That sucks for the founder who has probably sacrificed a lot of hours and their life. But that's what the state allows in order to be able to protect the best interest of the organization. Okay? Serve as a court of appeal. We talked about that. The board also assesses its own performance. Okay. Now let's take a look at the legal duties of the board. What I've stated above have the duties of the board. They're legal in a sense, but when we talk about legal duties, they usually talk about two duties. They talk about the duty of care and the duty of loyalty. Okay. They talk about the duty of care and the duty of loyalty. Now let's talk first about the duty of care. That means that the law requires board members to be people who act with reasonable care. See that I underline that in making decisions and doing things on behalf of the nonprofit, that they should get necessary information before making decision. And what is reasonable care? Reasonable care is the care that an average person would be expected to show when making a similar decision. It's not that you have to be an expert. It's just that the law requires that since you are being put as a trustee that is representing the public in running that organization that is owned by the public, not by the founder, not by the founder's family, but by the public, that you take some time and think, just like an average person on the street would, and make a reasonable decision when acting on behalf of the public. To do this, that if you just go acting nuts and you are fraudulent and you're doing things that it's like you were drunk before doing them, then you could be legally liable. But it is, let me tell you, it is almost impossible. It's so rare, it's almost impossible that a board member is prosecuted or held legally liable for what they did acting on the board, unless that what you did is so corrupt, is clearly corrupt, and you'll be held for corruption just like you'll be held for corruption somewhere else. And that it was just gross negligence. Like you didn't just do, like if you just showed up and got the information and sort of said, okay, let me know what's going on here, you would make the right decision. But it's just like you never showed up and you just voted without even using your brain, then you could actually be held liable. But this is so rare that if you're a reasonable, good person who just cares and gets on the board and you show up to meetings and you, okay, say, get information, okay, they want us to vote about this budget. Okay, so let's Is the organization able to afford this? Okay, let's see what last year's budget was and how was it spent. And okay, do we have some savings? Do Okay, what is our projected financial situation? Let's sort of look at that and see, okay, is this how I will manage money in my house? Like, do I have the money to go buy this, or am I going to swap a credit card? And to just help the organization be physically sound and making decisions like that. It's like ABC decisions that you don't need to sweat about. If you do that, you would serve well. And it's very rare for people to be persecuted. There are laws that protect people who serve on boards, and there are laws that protect volunteers against lawsuits. So you're not going to be sued if you just do what is reasonable, which you would not be invited to a board if you couldn't add math, do 2 plus 2 is 4, and think and know how to make basic decisions in life. You probably shouldn't be accepted on a board. But if you can do that, you certainly can serve on the board without any problem. Second one, again, is the duty of loyalty, or often called the fiduciary duty. Basically, this duty, the law requires that board members must act always in a way that puts the interests of the nonprofit ahead of their personal interests. That's it. That they should avoid conflict of interest or self-dealing, and always make decisions that are in the best interest of the organization. That's all the law requires. That, okay, you're not coming on this nonprofit organization board to represent yourself. And this law is very important. Founders need to understand this, and God requires that when you start a nonprofit organization, it's not for your sake. In fact, even though you are so passionate, the law does not require you to say that the best interest of the organization is determined by you being on the board. But if you choose wise Christian believers who are mature, who could hear the voice of God, and then you would ensure that God's voice is heard. And if God thinks that you are the one to be on the board, then God will speak through those people and put you first. And this requires trusting God. And this is something that when we're young in our faith, we don't know how to do. We often think, oh, we hear God better than everyone else around us. We might not say that. We might not even entertain that thought, but we act as though that were the case, in the sense that, okay, I should be able to, when I want to hear God, basically select mature people that I trust. These people are people of God. They are people who are people with good wills, good intent, that are going to seek the best interests of the organization, of the children that the organization serves, of the poor, or of the homeless that the organization serves. If you choose people like that, and you honestly seek God and choose those kind of people, then when the time comes for them to vote who should be the executive director, who should be the president, who should be the chairman of the board, then you should also put it in front of them and say, you are capable men and women of God with good will and good intent. I trust that the Lord of the heavens will speak through you. Let's look. Let's use the wisdom that God has given this board to select. If there's somebody out who can become a better executive director than a person who's already in the organization, and the interests of the children are served better, then by all means that person should be brought in if the board could afford to support and pay that person, or if the person wants to work for free. But you are pulling it, and then God will choose. If God then chooses you, the founder, to continue to do that, then you do. And that will be a thing that works, that also goes term by term. And it's a very difficult and vulnerable place to put yourself, given that you're thinking, gee, I'm starting this thing. It's my thing. If you think your nonprofit is your thing, you are acting illegally. You are stealing in the eyes of you're stealing the responsibility. You're stealing what belongs to the public, because you are owning it, and you are keeping the public from the Christian, from really owning it. So please think about it. This is This is a hard teaching. Very few people will accept this teaching in practice, but I know it's very true. But if you know that God is sovereign over the universe, that as it says in the book of Daniel, He raises up kings and He gives kingdoms to whomever He chooses. Read the book of Daniel, the first several chapters, and read what happened to King Nebuchadnezzar, and how he ended up confessing what I'm saying and saying, the Lord God of heaven, that he's the King of kings and he owns all kingdoms, and he raises above them men of low repute. He raises above them whomever he chooses, and he deposes them. Realize that you have to trust God to be able to raise you as king in your nonprofit that you founded, and also give God the room to say, no, I want someone else to lead for this season or forever, and I'm going to open another door for you. And the law requires that. Not doing that is breaking the law. It's illegal. And God hates for you to break the law, because the law in this case is a good law. If the law said don't pray, God will say break the law and pray. But this law say it's for everyone to follow, and it's meant to be able to protect the public, because the donations that come, they're public support. Okay? If you don't want to have donations or have any benefits start, then the law says, oh, you have an option. You could own this business, just run it as a for-profit business, and you will pay taxes like every other business. Then you could do whatever you want with your business. But if you're gonna want the public to be a part of this, the public has to own it, and it's legal. And God says, yes, the law is righteous, good, and you must follow it. If you break the law, you are disobeying God. There are some people who continuously disobey God while trying to serve God. By the way, they make decisions that are illegal and try do that to keep their ministries or to keep themselves at the center, but that's breaking the law. Okay? And if you break the law, you sin against God. Read Romans 13. Okay? Well, we've looked at the responsibilities of board of directors, and like I said at the beginning, the board of directors is like the Supreme Court, is like the Congress. It passes the laws that shape the organization. It passes the strategies and the policies, and it recruits the president. In this case, like in the US, you have three branches of government. You have the executive branch, the judicial branch, and then you have the legislative branch. And the people elect basically people to the legislative branch, Congress, and the people elect the president, and the president and the Congress choose the Supreme Court justices basically, and the Senate. The president recommends and the Senate basically approves it. But it's sort of similar, but it's a little different in that the board the board selects the president who will be the executive person that runs the organization on a daily basis, because the president runs the country. So the board is so powerful that it's both the Congress and the Supreme Court, and it elects the president. So the board really, it's like it runs the whole country that is the organization. And so this means that you have to select people to the board that are people of good reputation and people that are in the best interest of the organization, not your best interest, not my best interest.